Just how bad is stress for people with MS or chronic illness? It can affect almost every part of our body and affect our mental health as well. I've been living with MS for over 19 years, and I've learned that managing stress is key to living well with it. Most of the time, I'm a glasses half full and refillable kind of girl, but it took me some time to get here, and if I'm being honest, it's not always this way. I have my moments. One of the biggest times of stress for me was right after my diagnosis. I was grieving, I was worried about the future, I was afraid to start treatment, I was overwhelmed. The stress level was really, really high. And then I was outed, which added to my stress. I had shared my diagnosis with a few family and friends, but I neglected to say, please don't share this online or on social media. And you can probably guess what happened. People started posting on social media about my diagnosis and tagging me in posts about MS, MS research, herbs to help MS, MS diets, miracle cures, and it started this cascading effect. Pretty soon, it seemed like everyone knew about my MS, and everyone had advice on how I should be dealing with it, or how something that I did maybe brought it on or made it worse. I was quickly overwhelmed and completely stressed out. I felt like everyone had an opinion and no one had a filter. They just bombarded me with their thoughts and started telling me what I should do. Have any of you had this experience? Let me know in the comments below. With this sense of overwhelm and stress, I started to feel physically worse. I didn't realize it at the time, but the stress was contributing to my symptoms. It was causing them to flare and worsen. I just thought it was my MS getting worse, which made dealing with the diagnosis even harder, and I became even more stressed. Shortly after my diagnosis, though, I started to see a therapist, and she really helped me to sort out my feelings about my diagnosis and helped me with how I responded to input from others. Once I was able to put it into perspective and lower the stress levels, I realized that I was feeling better. The high levels of stress were having a physical effect on me. Over the years, I've seen my symptoms fluctuate with stressful times in my life. We all have them, right? There are relationship stresses, illness stresses, the pandemic stress, family drama, deaths, and even politics can stress us out. What are some of the things that stress you out? Let me know in the comments. Stress can affect all parts of our bodies. Our bodies send out these stress hormones that can be helpful in short bursts in small amounts, but chronic stress is linked to many symptoms that can affect all parts of our body, including our central nervous systems, our cardiovascular systems, digestive systems, our muscular systems, and more. Stress has long been associated with the development of MS, the severity of our symptoms, and relapses. In fact, French physician Jean-Martin Charcot, who's often called the father of neurology and is credited with first naming multiple sclerosis, said, grief, vexation, and adverse changes in social circumstance were related to the onset of MS. Even back in the 1800s, they knew that stress could affect us physically. Michael J. Fox has said that the ones living with the disease are the experts. So in one of the groups that I'm in, I asked how stress affects them, the hardest part of dealing with the stress, and what they do to deal with the stress. Here's what some of them had to say. 2 of my flares have been caused by stressful situations. And from another member, oh girl, stress breaks me. In exceptionally stressful times, I nearly always flare or relapse. Depending on how stressed I am and how little sleep I've had, the severity of my symptoms changes. And this. Stress affects the MS terribly, so much so that I'm not able to walk. The more stress, the worse it gets. I don't know how to manage stress. The smallest things turn into enormous mountains. The data backs this up too. In a review that was released in August of 2024 on MS disease onset, relapse risk, and disability progression, where they looked at studies from 1946 to 2022, they found some very interesting things. In the introduction, they said chronic stress is suggested to be a common risk factor in 75 to 90% of chronic non-communicable diseases. That's huge. In the review, they looked at 30 studies, including 10 that address stress and disease onset, meta-analysis of 3 studies investigating diagnosed stress disorders and MS risk that showed a 1.87-fold increase in MS risk, and 19 studies on stress and MS relapse risk. In the conclusion, they said, taken together, these studies indicate a minor to modest impact of psychological stressors on disease onset, inflammatory activity, and progression of MS. Yeah, even a minor impact on our risk of developing MS, having disease activity, and disease progression is too much. Am I right? In another review on stress, intestinal barrier dysfunction, and autoimmune disorders, they reported that many retrospective studies observed that most of the patients suffering from autoimmune diseases report uncommon emotional stress before disease onset. Around 70% of MS patients reported unusual amount of stress before the onset of disease. 70%. That's pretty compelling. And antidepressants decrease the risk of MS relapsing in women, and diazepam decreases experimental autoimmune encephalomyelitis incidence in the mouse model of MS. One of the ways that stress can affect us is by disrupting our intestinal barrier. It can lead to intestinal permeability and intestinal inflammation. This can lead to leaky gut and our immune system being triggered. Not only that, stress can alter our gut microbiome, and there are also recent studies showing that people with MS have differences in our gut microbiomes. To see more on that, you can watch a video I did on that in the card above, and I'll also put a link in the description below. This review goes on to say that defect of the intestinal barrier and systemic immune response is observed in 3 examples of autoimmune disorders: type 1 diabetes, systemic lupus, and multiple sclerosis. Yeah, stress is no good for our guts. This review concluded that compiling evidences highlight the importance of both intestinal barrier defect and stress in autoimmune diseases. Stress is well known to have long-lasting deleterious consequences on the intestinal barrier. So we know that stress is really not good for us, but what can we do about it? The members of my group where I asked about stress also had some great advice for dealing with stress too. One said, I've been diagnosed with MS for 48 years, and I know just how toxic stress can be, so I don't do it. I've learned that life can be hard and cruel. I accept that reality, and I don't harp on it. If I can't fix it, I ignore it. That is a great tip. Accepting things as they are and moving on. We are amazingly adaptable. I have permanent numbness and altered sensations. I have intermittent fatigue, spasms, and cog fog. They are what they are, and me stressing about them doesn't help. I've adapted to life with them, and I choose not to dwell on them. Another response was, I meditate and get massages. Oh, I love this one. Shortly after my diagnosis, I took an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction class that was life-changing. Mindfulness and meditation are so beneficial and effective at reducing stress. When we can be mindful in the present moment instead of worrying about the past or the future, we can reduce a lot of our stress. Another person in the group said nothing has been more important than the fascinating diligent study of meditation, which effectively eliminated stress for me. Very cool. And massages? Yes, they are good for us emotionally and physically. I highly recommend them. Another way we can reduce stress is to get out in nature. Getting outside in the dirt, among the trees, and in the fresh air can go a long way to help us let go of stress. I did another video on the benefits of forest bathing that I'll link above and below too. Exercise can help us with stress too. When we exercise, our bodies produce endorphins that help us to feel better. They elevate our mood and create feelings of happiness and well-being. We also sleep better when we exercise regularly. I try to purposefully move my body every day. I walk, do Zumba, Pilates, or lift weights. Do you ever notice how good you feel after exercising? Let me know in the comments what exercises work for you and how you feel after exercising. So, to get back to the stress of people giving us advice or telling us how we should be living with our MS, it seems like this is universal. We've all experienced it, and it can be so challenging. I remember thinking things like, they just don't get it. They don't understand that I'm never going to get better. They aren't even trying to understand how one day can be worse than the previous and how my symptoms can fluctuate. Luckily, my therapist helped me to realize something very, very important. All these people that are offering me advice and giving me unsolicited feedback, they all had one thing in common. They all cared for me. Every single one of them. They didn't want me to be sick. They didn't want to see me struggling. They wanted to help me. Even the ones that seemed to lose patience with me or didn't share their advice in a kind way, they were struggling too. They couldn't possibly understand what it's like to live with MS because they don't have it. And honestly, I'm sure it's confusing for them when they see me fine on one day and then not be able to do things the next day. Most of the time, people genuinely want to help, even if they don't always deliver it well. I know they want to help. So I've come up with some typical responses to people that give me advice that maybe will help you too. I say, thanks for sharing that. I'll look into it. Or, I work with my medical team on treatments that are best for me. Or, that's not for me, but I appreciate you looking out for me. Or if you really don't want to talk about it, just say, this one's from my therapist. It acknowledges that you heard them, but it doesn't agree or disagree with them. And then you can change the subject and move on. No need for uncomfortable or negative conversations. These responses allow us to keep our sanity and keep our relationships intact. Do you have tips on dealing with stress or how to respond to stressful situations in our lives? I would love to see the comments section full of your tips. Like I said earlier, the people living with the disease are the experts, and we can share and learn from one another. To see more on living well with MS, watch these videos next. And until next time, be well.